and Craig Smoak.
We went straight to Ryan Abraham when that USC-UCLA story popped back in July, and we've had him on many times to discuss USC, owner, publisher of USCFootball.com. He joins us on 365 Sports. Ryan, thank you. With Craig and Paul, I'm David Smoak. Have the Trojans been better than you thought they would be through 3 weeks?
Yeah, it's we talked a lot in the offseason because all kinds of crazy stuff happened. You hire Lincoln Riley, you joined the Big Ten and all that. But they were actually looking really good on the field as well. I think defensively, it's still a work in progress. They've given up a lot of yards, but they've been very opportunistic. They've 26 tackles for loss through 3 games. They've forced 10 turnovers. So they're making the most of the opportunities when they get, especially when an opponent gets in the red zone. But really what's impressed me has been the offensive side of the ball. And, they hit the transfer portal hard, bringing guys like, the Blitnikoff Award winner Jordan Addison and Caleb Williams. And they, the 2 of the best running backs in the Pac-12, Travis Dye and Austin Jones, joined the roster too, from Oregon and Stanford respectively. And man, they've just been clicking. And, they've the first 3 drives at least of every game, they've scored a touchdown just to start the game. So it's 21 points out of the gate in every game so far. And I just haven't expected that. I mean, it's not just that they have athletes making plays, but Lincoln Riley has a great scheme. They're scheming guys open. It's, last year it was basically throw to a triple covered Drake London, who's, playing for the Atlanta Falcons now. And that worked sometimes until he got hurt. But this is actually a competent offense with really good players running it. And that's why I think it's been so successful so far.
Could you make the argument that this week against Oregon State on the road is one of their 2 toughest games remaining for the season?
For sure. And I thought, this was one I circled from the beginning. Oregon State didn't lose at home last year, and they really put a beat down on USC in the Coliseum. It's crazy just the way they were able to run downhill. So this is going to be, I think it's going to be a tough test for sure. I don't think they have the defense really to kind of hang with USC, but they're a team that can run right at you. Chance Nolan has been really good so far this year, the quarterback for Oregon State. He was great against USC last year, but not really against anybody else. He's been good at, in all the games. They've already beat Fresno State. They've beat Boise State. So I think it's a legit team. Jonathan Smith has kind of built that up from the ground up. You remember he was a quarterback there back in 2000 when they had like Chad Ochocinco and they beat the heck out of Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl. He's really got this team going in the right direction. So it's certainly one of the ones I circled, this one, and at Utah. So if they get through this one, then you start talking about, okay, this could be I didn't think they could be like a 11-1 type of team, but if they beat Oregon State this weekend, I think that's certainly in the cards.
Ryan, you kind of ran down some of the transfers on the offensive side of the ball. We could go one by one with those names. All college football stars. For the hardcore fan and even the casual fan. In the case of Caleb Williams and Jordan Addison, let's start with those 2. Caleb Williams and Jordan Addison. A lot of fanfare, a lot of hype, a lot of expectations. What have you seen from your front row view through these first 3 games from those 2?
Yeah, starting with Addison, he came in late. He wasn't here in the spring. And they had a really good receiver room already, and they brought in transfers from Colorado, like Jerry Rice's son. They bring in a guy from Washington. They bring in Mario Williams from Oklahoma. And then you bring in the number 1, the best returning receiver in the country. And you're like, well, how is this going to work? And he's fit in really well. It seems like the guys, everyone's respected him, and he's come out and played well. He had 5 touchdowns through the first 3 games, and he had a 6th one called back. It's just been, it was a 75-yard bomb. It would be a little screen pass that he breaks off and runs with. So he's done just about everything you could have asked. And Caleb Williams and him have got great chemistry together. Caleb Williams has just been incredible. I know there was been, some criticism the way he played last year. He was a true freshman, only playing 8 games, but he came in and just took over the locker room, has won every press conference, every kind of media availability. He's just been great at. And then when you see him on the field, just really efficient. Now, the last game against Fresno State, I think he had 12 incompletions, which was more than he had through the first 2 games. But when a game like that, when it's sort of a little clunky for him, the run game starts working. They had both 2 running backs go over 100 yards. So I think he's complemented this team well. He's been a good leader. And just been able to find guys open. If he'll take off and run if he has to. Some USC had like a quarterback that could threaten with their legs in a while. So I think he's just done just about everything you could ask for him if you're a USC fan.
But he's been sacked 7 times, and I haven't gone. I was trying to go game by game. They've handled their business. Has that been any kind of an issue, or is that just okay? It's 2.5 times he's been sacked a game. Which you'd rather cut that down?
Yeah, like the last game, I think he was sacked 3 times, and USC lost their starting left tackle, and then their backup went out, and they had the third string guy in there. And the guy and Lincoln Riley said, I asked him about it. He's like, yeah, I put the guy in a bad situation. It's like putting a kicker in for a 60-yard field goal to start his career. And I gave up a sack right away. And then there was another one later in the game where he kind of ran around a little, held the ball a little too long. I think in the first game against Rice, he had 68 yards rushing in that one and picked up chunks all the time. And I feel like we went back in the archives for USC. We couldn't find a quarterback that ran for that many yards. Like Rodney Peete didn't back in the late 80s. So I'm not sure if USC had a quarterback that ran that much. And you kind of felt like they were going to back off of that a little bit. And so, maybe he was staying in the pocket a little longer than he would have liked and got sacked a couple more times. But I think overall, the offensive line has played pretty well. They should be healthy going to the Oregon State game. I think both of those left tackles are going to be back. But some of it's just, I think, Caleb Williams trying to figure out what he wants to be as far as a quarterback. He doesn't want to be known as a guy that just takes off and runs, but that can be really effective sometimes.
Well, they've only had two home games. One of them was Rice to open the season, and then Fresno State. But what's the fan buzz been like on game day at the Coliseum?
Yeah, the first game was like 100-something degrees. It was just miserable in LA, and it's still a decent crowd. And then the Fresno State game, they had, I think, 67,000 or some people come. So it was not bad for a night game here. It's built up. I think we've just seen it in all of our shows and the content we put up. There's so much more interest right now than there was before. Just in the Clay Helton era, it got to the point where USC could sign a 5-star player, and then people would be like, oh, Clay Helton's the coach. It doesn't matter. Now people are excited about anything, and I think they're excited to come to the Coliseum. They want to come out and see this team. So their next home game is another night one, too, so we'll see how that does against Arizona State, who just fired their head coach. But there's been a lot more buzz and a lot more excitement from the fan base we've seen than really in the last 7-8 years.
Has there been much outcry about the TV coverage for this game being on Pac-12 Network? I've seen definitely on the Oregon State side of things some outcry and some people upset about the lack of mainstream coverage for what should be maybe one of the best games in the Pac this year.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and I think a lot of USC fans are like, see, this is why we're leaving because the Pac-12 sucks. It's something that happened. It's not like George Kliavkoff's fault, the commissioner. I mean, this was something that happened 10 years ago.
Right.
If you have for every non-conference home game, you have to have a game on a Pac-12 network. So USC has 3 non-conference home games this year. The Rice game was on Pac-12 network. They need 2 more, and then it's ESPN and Fox picking. And from my understanding is, if USC does make some sort of run, they want to save their USC picks until later in the season. So even though it's a great matchup, 2 undefeated teams, I think the networks balked on it because they don't want to lose out an opportunity to get USC later on. And there's like a USC Colorado game, but that's already on a Friday, so that couldn't be on Pac-12 network. It's already on FS1. So it's definitely unfortunate. I think the kind of inventory that the Pac-12 wanted on their network, I get why you wanted to do it, but when your distribution's terrible, then as soon as you get a game on the network, everyone's moaning and groaning. So it's tough. 6:30 p.m. game on the West Coast on the Pac-12 network. It's not going to get watched out, outside of the region, but it's definitely going to be a good game.
USC Colorado is going to be a bloodbath. Oh my gosh, that's going to be.
They're so terrible.
Oh man.
Ryan, why are they? They're not only terrible. They're not like boring and terrible. Like sometimes you can be bad, but an adventure, they're just bland.
Yeah, it's Carl Durrell, and you feel like he hadn't coached in college in like a decade, and he wasn't good when he coached in college. It just seems like the hire was kind of like what, and then they go to Minnesota last year and get shut out, and Minnesota, that was the only game that they actually scored a bunch of points. They fire their offensive coordinator. That's who Colorado hired. So that's what you're talking about. Like that's the kind of stuff that's going on there, and his buyout's really high. So I don't see this. Rick George, I think, is a really good AD, but he's in a tough spot over there. I don't know how they got locked into Carl Durrell this long, but agents always get their way, and now I don't think they can get out of it for a while. So I'm not expecting them to get better anytime soon.
You only saw the one game? It was Stanford, and this is the game. Is it at Oregon State or is it home?
On the road.
Okay. Has there been any, or will you even see that in the Pac-12? Any kind of bitterness about USC or UCLA leaving?
I think that you could at Stanford. I mean, at Stanford, it's just they don't care that much. So the fans don't care all that much. There was probably more USC fans there than Stanford fans. Oregon State, they would. Now, the problem is they're renovating Research Stadium, and half of it's gone. So there's only going to be like 26,000 people there. Probably still be loud, but I think when you go to Utah, there's going to be some animosity there, even though they're the newer, member of the Pac-12. But I think those are the kind of spots. Like, they're going to go to Tucson. I don't think that's going to be that big of a deal, but we'll see. I mean, but there's definitely some bitterness, and I think UCLA is a little different too because there's a lot of UCLA fans that don't want to go. But I think for the most part, USC fans are happy to get out of the Pac-12, and I don't think the rest of the fan base in the Pac-12 didn't like USC anyway, and this doesn't help that.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, going to Tucson, I mean, there's a faction in Tucson that is kind of thankful for USC and UCLA because it's given them an opportunity to complain about the Pac-12.
Yeah, I think they're openly trying to get to the Big 12. We'll see. Like, there's writers that cover the team that I've seen that's like, are they like campaigning to join the Big 12? But that's an exciting program, and they're to get the wins that they've got already. I think they've just been they're on the right trajectory with Jed Fish. That's exciting. Like, you're talking about, they were 1-11 last year, but they weren't boring, and they were in all those games. Like, Colorado's just not in games, so we'll see if Fish can get to a bowl game this year. It might be tough, but they're definitely on the right trajectory where Arizona State is going the other way. But I don't know if they can get there. Their schedule is really tough. I don't know. They didn't do themselves any favor with that schedule, but they're definitely on the up and up.
Ryan, do you feel or get a sense that there will be anyone else that the Big Ten makes sure is in the same time zone with USC and UCLA, or would USC and UCLA really want that?
I don't think USC wanted like Oregon coming. They had some battles, and I think USC was pretty happy to leave Oregon behind and just be like, Oregon was acting like they were the blue blood on the West Coast. That just wasn't the case. It just kind of proved it. So I don't think there was any, love lost there. If like the Cal Stanford or something would come, I don't think USC or UCLA would have a problem with that. That would probably be the best situation as far as travel and things like that. But with the playoff expansion, I'm not sure we're going to see any more movement right now. Every time you say that, teams jump ship and go somewhere else. But it seems like there's reasons to stay in the Big 12 or stay in the Pac-12 because you still have access to the playoffs now. So maybe this calms it down. But if it does, and there's still a chance, I guess UCLA could get, the regents could say you have to stay, and that would leave USC all alone in the Big Ten. That would be a lot tougher. I think you need your partner for sure. But if I don't think they'd mind Washington coming, but I think they would have an issue with Oregon, and they wouldn't mind like if the California schools came along. I just don't see that happening.
Ryan, good stuff as always. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. USCFootball.com. Inside Troy on Twitter. Ryan Abraham on Southern Cal, Oregon State, and on USC through 3 games.